In a world where we seldom get full-length AAA VR games, we find ourselves constantly looking to the past, wondering why developers haven't taken the obvious route of converting games that were a big deal 5, 10, or even 15 years ago, and instead of remastering them yet again for 4K graphics, 60 FPS with HDR and ray tracing, why not bring them into VR for a new level of immersion? It worked great for Skyrim and Borderlands 2, but that's barely scratching the surface. There are literally thousands of games with untapped potential. So with the announcement that developer Archaeact was bringing Doom 3, a game that originally launched back in 2004, into VR, it seemed like this was exactly what we've been asking for. Knowing that Doom 3 was coming to PSVR, I immediately dove back into the PlayStation 4 non-VR version and started over from scratch to refresh my memory of this 17-year-old game. And immediately I encountered a few red flags. The graphics were fine, but obviously just higher res versions of a really old game. There were way more cutscenes than I remembered, making me wonder how the PSVR version would handle this. And the game just pauses randomly to save, rather than throwing up a subtle icon on the screen letting you know that it's auto-saving in the background. Surely when the developers went to task porting this game into VR, they'd address all these concerns, right? Well, no, they didn't. In fact, when I say that Doom 3 VR Edition is a straight port of the original game, I'm not exaggerating. The graphics aren't nearly as sharp as you'd expect, giving the game some disappointing blur. The cutscenes are all still in 2D, and their frequency killed the immersion and flow of the game. The autosaving shockingly still pauses the game at random moments, and the most surprising thing is that the scale of the world is totally off. This is never more apparent than when talking to NPCs or blasting away enemies that are about 30% smaller than they should be. And it's tough to tell on a flat screen, but some of the newly modeled weapons are almost laughably primitive looking, as if someone drew a picture of a gun on the side of some gun-shaped polygons. But so many of these complaints fall by the wayside once you get past the introduction and start getting into the meat of the gameplay. And I'll tell you that a lot of what makes this port fun revolves around the implementation of the aim controller itself. The second I picked up a handgun and started pulling off headshots was a transformative moment, and the exact time I realized how much fun I was about to have. Doom 3 can get really repetitive with its dark corridors, copied and pasted metal hallways, and an enormous amount of backtracking. But coming around the corner to a series of enemies or opening a door to have a demon immediately pounce on you keeps the energy level high, and getting to hold the two-handed weapons with the aim controller and blow away enemies with shotguns, machine guns, miniguns, plasma rifles, and more dials the intensity up to 11. There's no move support, but I'll say that if you don't have an aim controller, I was really surprised by how well the DualShock 4 works. The weapon offset is huge, meaning you can play pretty casually and rest the controller in your lap during longer play sessions, and still play fairly comfortably. I don't want to focus too much on how great the budget $20 price tag is here, because yeah, Doom 3 is almost 2 decades old, and it shouldn't be a full price game, but the value proposition here is still amazing. If you've never played Doom 3 before, expect to sink about 12 hours in before rolling credits on the campaign, then another 6 for the included DLC packs, The Lost Mission and Resurrection of Evil. They're both unlocked and playable from the get-go, and luckily have a slightly different feel about them than the slower paced campaign. See, a pretty common complaint about Doom 3 proper is that there's no map, no mini-map, or waypoints, meaning that you'll stumble around aimlessly quite a bit at some point or another. You'll also be scouring the environments for PDAs that contain audio logs and emails that frequently reveal locker combinations. It adds an element of exploration and gives a sense of what this Mars facility was like before all hell broke loose, but it also slows the game down to a crawl every 20 minutes or so. For those who don't enjoy that, the DLC is a lot more straightforward and brings to mind what you think of when you think of classic Doom gameplay. The horror element of Doom 3 might scare off a few cats who otherwise might be fairly interested, but honestly it's not that bad. Don't get me wrong, as someone who absolutely loves horror, it's what makes Doom 3 my favorite entry into the series, but it's still very much a fast-paced, straightforward first-person shooter. There are plenty of jump scares and enemies crashing through walls to keep the tension high, but you're also armed to the gills with over-the-top weapons, so you'll never have a home sweet home moment where you'll feel scared and defenseless. When we talk about old games we'd love PSVR versions of, Doom 3 VR Edition is both the answer we've been looking for and a cautionary tale that tickling our nostalgia isn't as simple as flipping a switch. Doom 3 VR is lucky that the core game is still a ton of fun, rife with tension, occasionally scary, and packed with content. So while the VR port isn't terribly impressive, the game itself still manages to shine, and even after all these years, I'd still consider it a must-play for both first-person shooter fans and horror fans. But I'm really hoping that Archaeact has a patch on the way to address some of our bigger concerns.